Hello and welcome, Snappers, to a new episode of the Snap Chatter Podcast. This is a weekly Marvel Snap podcast with your favorite host, or at least I hope we're your favorite. I'm one of your hosts, Logan.
You're my favorite host, Logan. And I'm the other side of that. I'm Nate.
Nate, you're my favorite host as well, man.
Sweet.
The hostess with the mostest, as they say.
We are not the hostesses, but the hostess.
Not the right. Yeah. The hostesses, but not the hostesses, right? You gotta get your syllable on your syllable correct, or whatever that phrase goes.
The emphasis on the right syllable.
Yeah. That's it. That's exactly it. You know, that's how it is. Thankfully, we're not an English podcast in terms of like we're trying to speak English here and teach you English, because that's not what we're here for. We're to just talk about Marvel Snap and have a good time.
Well, I was going to say, because for you, words are hard, and someday Nate talk pretty.
That's one of these days.
That's how we vibe, man. That's how we vibe.
That's how we vibe, man. We understand that. It's funny because for those who don't know, you know, I'm a high school teacher, and there was an incident today where some students were trying to talk and stuff, and they were just tripping over their words. I was just like, guys, just stop. Words are hard. And they laugh and were like, you're right, they are. I'm like, yeah, words are hard.
It's funny because it's true.
It is funny because it's true. And it just seems to get worse as you get older. You just kind of get worse at saying things. It is what it is, man.
Dude.
It is what it is. But Nate, man, it's good to see you. How you been? How's your Marvel Snap playing been going over the past week, man? Have you raged at all at any more Scorpion plays?
All right. Yeah. I wasn't going to go there, man. No. I mean, there was like a couple days where I was like straight up, like, if it was like turn 1 Iceman, turn 2 Scorpion, I was like, peace, take the cube, like get out of my face.
Yep.
After I lost like a couple of like ranks on that, I was just like, okay. Like, you know, like, I guess I need to like teach some scrubs, you know, how to get good. But you know, I've basically just for the last week with the play, last couple of weeks it's just been like just doing my dailies. Haven't been trying to do a lot of climbing. It just kind of, I don't know, been pretty low key, but it's been cool. I picked up some cards that I've been meaning to, or I've been wanting to for a while. I shared with you. Mm-hmm. I finally got She-Hulk. Yeah. So nice. That really, like, she is a top tier. She is an S tier card.
She's awesome.
Like the pairing with her and Arrow. Then like we were talking about it in the TRG Discord a little bit. The turn 5, you play Magic, skip turn 6, and then turn 6 you can drop you basically 30 points on the board with her and Infinite.
Yep.
She's got some like, and she's just a really great card. Like she can come out pretty early. And I
think it's as early as turn. Is it turn 3? It's either turn 3 or turn 4. She can show up.
I think turn 3. I saw her.
Yeah.
But turn 4. But yeah, still. But it doesn't matter. She's a pretty awesome card. And if you ramp with like Electro and stuff like that, anyways,
it's even more crazy.
Yeah, it gets pretty wild. But yeah, I got her. I got Electro finally.
Buddy,
dude, and he's gonna enable me to just get like all sorts of mad scientist. But he's a lot of fun. I was telling you, I've been playing a lot of like you threw a Mr. Negative deck at me build, and I didn't have all the pieces. I was missing Shuri, but I kind of put something together, and I've been playing around with that. That deck is like stupid fun. Fun.
It's kind of like what we were saying in the pre-show a little bit here before we started recording, that, you know, it took me buying an outrageously overpriced bundle and then throwing up afterwards, realizing what I did. But I'm like, I guess I better get some mileage out of this card. And then I was like, Mr. Negative actually is a lot of fun and does some pretty wild things with the cards. So I was like, yeah, okay. But yeah, he's fun. I mean, you asked for a weird deck and I gave you one, man.
Yeah, that was the thing. I wanted something kind of weird. And I had toyed around with a Mr. Negative build before, and I just hadn't really found anything that I liked. And you threw that one at me, and I was like, yo, I can sort of work with this. It's got a lot of like late game, like turn 5, turn 6, like just explosiveness, which, you know, kind of actually leads one of the things, we're going to be talking about some of the changes to the format and everything.
Yeah.
Sandman got that nice, that 5 power bump. He's now
Yes,
a
he
5
did.
cost, and he's going to shut down those decks.
Yeah.
So.
I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing it play. And let's go ahead and jump into it. And before we do, just a real quick reminder, just in case you saw the title of the episode, this is going to be our Modok lore card episode. We're going to talk about the recent patches, or the recent patch. See, words are hard. The recent patch notes that dropped here the week of this recording. And then we'll go into talking about Modok, what we think of them, how we think he did over this season, and just kind of give our thoughts on the card itself. Would we snap or pass on the card? And just kind of go from there on the card. And then at the end of the episode, my boy Colin recorded a special little segment there, giving you a little brief history of the card itself. If you are watching this on YouTube, the video is going to be its own separate upload. So you'll have to click the video at the link at the end of the video to go see it. If you're listening to this on audio feeds, it's just going to play right into it at the end. So you'll have that there waiting for you. But Nate, let's get into the most recent patch notes for Marvel Snap that dropped on February 21st, the day after that this episode that we are recording here. So a lot of cool things in this in these patch notes here. Obviously, they had their series drop cards. So you had these cards dropping from series 5 to 4, which were Silver Surfer, Null, Darkhawk, Sentry. I personally got Null after that teardrop, and man, Null is insane. I found out that if you play Null somehow on turn 5, usually like with Electro or Wave or something, and then you do Arnim Zola, it creates an even more powerful Null in the other 2 lanes. And I'm like, this is just insane. So I'm having a lot of fun with that card. Mm-hmm. But then we also had these cards going from Series 4 to Series 3, which is Agent Coulson, Maria Hill, and Helicarrier. Mm-hmm. So you can get those. I actually got Agent Coulson as well, who is surprisingly good in my birthday bounce house deck that I'm using.
He's got
really cool stuff.
He's got some great synergies though, too, man. Like he
really does.
All of those shield cards work really, really well with the collector. But Coulson in particular used to pair really nicely with Zabu pre-nerf. And he still kind of work because he gives you a random 4-drop. I don't know. Like, I think Agent Coulson is kind of still a pretty decent utility card. With what is he, a 3-4, 3-5?
He's a 3-4. I've got it pulled up right here that I'm looking at. Adds a random 4 cost, or adds a random 4 and 5 cost card to your hand. So it's coming clutch, man. I didn't think Agent Coulson was that great of a card, but after several games of using him, I'm like, I've been sleeping on Agent Coulson. He's a pretty good card. I was surprised. It's wild.
I mean, sometimes he's going to give you turds, but I mean, typically 4 and 5 drops tend to be pretty decent. So he's probably more often than not, he's going to give you at least something you can use. I like him. I like him a lot.
I do too. He's really good. So you'll see those in your token shop for those of you that have unlocked it if you are past collection level 500. And so you'd be looking out for those there. I would personally recommend Agent Coulson, to be honest, if you're in Series 3 and getting those cards. He's really surprisingly good card. A few of the changes they made, there's some art and visual effects I'm not going to go over, except for the one that I've been clamoring for a while now, which is Mysterio's Illusions will now use your variant that you have selected. Finally,
nice.
All Dan hit variants will show up across the lane. So it's about time, because Mysterio has some really, really cool variants. I'm going to try and get some up on the screen here for YouTube, but man, it's nice to see that they're finally the actual variants across all the lanes that he gets played at.
Well, and that's kind of like with a lot of those cards that's spit, like Bucky Barnes is one of them. Hood gives you like the demons. I always thought, like, wouldn't it be kind of cool, like, if they did like for a chibi version of Bucky Barnes, you got like a chibi Winter Soldier, you know?
Yes.
So yeah,
that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that they're working on that now. Excuse me. So that in a later patch, like if you have like the sports variant, right, of Bucky Barnes, then it changes to Winter Soldier, that with like a sports variant or something. I would love to see that personally.
Yeah.
Just because I think that's kind of a missed opportunity. I get they have to, commission the artists and do all that, and that requires money, which we'll get into the next episode. But
for sure. Yeah, we will get into that.
Fair enough. We will get into the money side of Marvel Snap. But probably the biggest changes here have been with two cards in particular. I'm going to go over some of the other ones just to kind of get those out of the way, and then we'll focus on the other two. But the first big change is, it's not really a big change, but Darkhawk has gone from a 4-cost 1 power to a 4-cost 0 power, which I don't think is that big of a nerf because his ongoing ability is +2 power for each card in your opponent's deck. It's still an insane power. I don't think losing that 1 power is really gonna change much. He's still an insanely powerful
Since
card.
the Zabu nerf, he is a little less explosive, but still, like you throw like Rock Slide, Korg in a deck with him, he's going to get beefy, no problems. It's a little bit of a nerf, but I mean, the problem with Darkhawk is that he is so situational. You have to be putting cards into your opponent's deck. So you're going to have to play stuff like, again, Korg, Rock Slide, stuff like that. So,
Yep. Even Sandman, you know, I could see Darkhawk being a really good like 6-cost, or not 6-cost, but like a 6 turn 6 card where you drop him on turn 6 and all of a sudden, boom, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, there's a super powered dude on the board. But that's one change. Spider Woman went from a 5-cost 7 power to a 5-cost 8 power, which is fine. Namor got a surprising buff from a 4-cost 5 power to a 4-cost 6 power. And if you have him in the lane by himself, he has +5 power, which is an ongoing effect. So he effectively becomes a 4-cost 11 power card, which I was watching some videos. I'm like, man, this kind of makes Orca look a little more weak now because Namor just got this pretty big buff. So it'd be interesting to see Namor.
And that was the thing is like, I remember looking at the disparity between Namor and Orca and just like, well, you know, Orca's a little more expensive, but if you're throwing him in a lane by himself, he's a significantly better value.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens to him. Dagger got a buff as well from a 2-cost 1 power to a 2-cost 2 power, which is pretty nice, getting that extra point there. That'll be nice for those of you running move decks. That'll be kind of fun to see that. But the two biggest surprises in this whole patch notes was my boy Thanos going from a 6-cost 8 power to a 6-cost 11 power. Dude, I don't know that this buff was needed, to be completely honest.
No way, man. He gets to be a big, strong, chunky boy. Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, I'm actually all about it. The Mad Titan at a 6'8" always felt underpowered, and now, like, even by himself, he's kind of nasty. Like, he needs to be a threat on the board, in my opinion. And then if you can roll out all the stones on him, what does he get? What is it, like +10 on that or something like that?
Let me pull it up real quick and you keep talking while I check this out here.
So, I mean, like, he needs to, like, I don't know. Maybe an 11 is a little excessive, but frankly, I when I saw that, I was like, actually, that feels right. Because like, even with like Lockjaw and, you know, sort of like things where you're gaming the RNG and all of that, you still have to get all 6 stones into play. So, and that can be a bit of a feat.
Yeah. And oftentimes, I mean, because I've been running Thanos in my decks for the last few weeks, you know, oftentimes it's pretty easy to pull all the stones, but it's not exactly easy to play all the stones. And oftentimes, by the time you play 4 out of the 6 stones, you don't really need the other 2, because if you put them in the right deck with the right cards, you almost never really saw Thanos. But now you're kind of seeing him more. I'm definitely playing him more because of that 6-11. And you're right, Nate. If you play the Power Stone along with all the other cards, and the Power Stone is still at play on the board, Thanos jumps 10 points in power. So he becomes a 621, which is just freaking nuts.
I don't know, that, like I said, that feels as sort of like he's the Mad Titan. He is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel universe. And it's like, not, but like he's up there, like can go toe to toe with, he's a powerhouse. And so I'm just like, dude, like, I feel like it's kind of cool that they put some respect on him. I'll be honest. Like I'm there for that.
That's like, I'm of two minds. I'm like, I don't know if he needed this, but at the same time, I love the additional power on the board because, man, it's imposing. It's scary. I'm
Well,
not going to lie.
and it's like you said, though, you get all six stones, like, because basically the stones, the most often the way that I would see him played was with like a zoo deck, a zoo kind of ramp
Mm-hmm.
deck. And
Yeah.
now, like, and you're right, you didn't need to play him because you could just play the stones and Khazar and like maybe like Blue Marvel or like, but it's like
Yep.
you throw him out there and you've got like a massive threat on the board somewhere.
The other most surprising buff was Sandman went from a 4-cost 1 power to a 5-cost 5 power now, giving him, in my opinion, way more value and way more of a presence. I'm seeing him played so much just from yesterday and today, the time that we're recording. I'm seeing him a lot more on the board, and I've had to get pretty creative about countering him. Thankfully, Galactus is kind of coming clutch on turn 5 or turn 4 whenever he's played, and so that's been really nice. But Nate, what did you think about that?
I'm all about it. Like Sandman is a card that I liked. I like the idea where you're stalling out, like you're basically sort of like you're applying a universal sort of electro restriction, like across the board. And the only counter for him is to like basically sort of like whack him with Enchantress. And at a 4/1, he was fine for a stall, but he didn't have, it was like, there was almost like no point in having him on the board. And we were sort of talking about this in the Discord a little bit. Like it is kind of like you can ramp up to him using Electro, Psylocke, or what's the other one? Wave. You can sort of ramp him into turn 4 still, and he's going to have a much more significant impact. But turn 6 is always the most important turn. And a lot of the really sort of like the really high level decks are playing combos on turn 6. You know, like we talked about, just like some of the base level stuff is like a really killer little combo is on turn 6, you skip turn 5, and then you play She-Hulk and Arrow, and you can throw 17 power on the board for 6, and you can do some lane control. That combo is shut down. Anything like we were talking about the Mr. Negative deck that I've been playing lately. Like that's all, like turn 5 is when I just go bonkers. I'm holding on to a lot of that stuff. And then it's like turn 5, I drop a whole bunch of 0-cost stuff and watch my board just explode. Right. Yeah. No longer an option.
That's gone.
So it's like there are some decks that he's not going to affect, but for the decks that he's going like, and having him on the board as a 5 makes him a much more like, he's a much bigger threat on the board. You know, as a 4/1, it was negligible, and it's like,
it really didn't feel good to play at all. No. At least when I played him, I was like, this is cool for a stall, like you said, but at the same time, it's like this just doesn't feels kind of like weak. Like I feel like I could play something else and do better, and
especially for the way that it affects you those last 2 turns. Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of dig where it's at. I'm excited to see him get a little bit more play. Now I just need them to do something with my boy Ronan. Like they got to do something with Ronan, man.
I think what Ronan needs is just some more support cards. You know, Devil Dinosaur has so many support cards to play with them. You have Agent 13, you have Cable, you have Moon Girl, you have Agent Coulson, you have Maria Hill. Just cards that'll give you cards back in your deck. Thanos, even playing the stones that are drawing cards constantly, because I have Devil Dinosaur in my Thanos deck. So many great cards to help you out, but not really anything for Ronan. You have a couple cards like Maximus and
Baron Mordo and Black Widow.
Whatever else, Baron Mordo, yeah. So you have those, but I guess now Sandman too. I mean, well,
Sandman as a stall is going, like, especially if you play him earlier, is going to force them to keep cards in their hand. And if you're putting cards in their hand, like, so I don't know.
Could work. Y'all have to let us know if you're playing Ronan. But I thought this was much needed, because Sandman always just felt weird to play, but now he feels really good. I've run him several times earlier today, and I was like, man, this feels so much better now. And not half the time, but sometimes you don't even need him, depending on who you're going up against. But for those that you do need it for, it's very helpful. Very,
Yeah,
very
like
helpful.
I mean, like how many times are you going to see like somebody playing a Mr. Negative deck, and then you're just like, oh, well, I got Sandman in the pocket, and it's like you shut down the entire trajectory of the rest of the game for them.
Yep. Yep. And then they retreat and you get your cube, move on to
Yeah.
the next one. One last thing I will say, there's a whole lot of stuff here in the patch notes. I'll link to it in the show notes so those of you listening can go check it out for yourself. But the big one here is Absorbing Man got one that not a lot of people are talking about outside of people like Cozy Snap and some of the other YouTubers. Absorbing Man's effect can now be doubled by effects like Wong, Kamartaj, and Odin. So if he took an ability from, let's say, Hazmat to replay that ability, if you drop him on Wong, well, yeah, no, if you drop, let's put this scenario out there. You play Wong, then Hazmat, then Absorbing Man. He'll take Hazmat's ability, apply those effects twice, then you drop Odin, and he just repeats that stuff there, which I didn't know he didn't do that before. I didn't know he was a one and done sort of thing with those cards or those abilities.
That actually makes him a lot more utilitarian. He's
yeah.
Absorbing Man is a card I've been wanting to like sort of like slide into some decks. I haven't found anything that like I missed the window where you could do like the totally toxic like turn 5 Spider-Man Absorbing Man combo.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
back when Zabu was before he got nerfed, yeah.
But I do think like he's got some like I've tried pairing him with some like I had a Venom build where I had him in there for a little bit and it was interesting.
Yeah.
But that's kind of cool. That actually makes him sort of more of like because Mystique basically becomes a copy of the whatever ongoing she's copying.
The ongoing stuff, yeah.
So this actually makes him, it just sort of like, well, he just takes this ability now. I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Now you have 2 Hazmats, so
yeah,
do with that what you will.
You're giving me ideas, buddy.
It's always fun for those good toxic decks. But speaking of, I don't know if this Modok is really toxic, but let's kind of segue into talking about our boy Modok here. We've had pretty much an entire season with Modok here. He was a season pass card. He destroys the cards in your hand once you drop them on the field. And we've seen just a huge renaissance, so to speak, of discard decks. Not that discard decks were really bad, so to speak, but they weren't getting played quite as much as different metas came into the play and were doing different things. But man, Modok revived discard decks with a vengeance. Yeah. I still run into them quite a bit. I was playing Modok a little bit earlier today in prep for this episode because I realized I only played him that first week that I had him and then moved on to other things. And I was like, man, Modok is kind of gnarly when you pair him with certain cards. And so, man, Nate, what was it like for you to go into this season, get Modok, and just see kind of what he did to the Marvel Snap landscape?
Well, I'll tell you what, like, I really appreciated, like, there's a pretty straightforward build, and it's Morbius turn 2. It's Mystique turn 3. It's Wong turn 4, and then you throw you throw Modok onto Wong, and you sort of, and especially if you've got like Swarm in there, he just gobbles up everything, and you get these nice big beefy sort of like, Morbius, instead of being like a so-so card, turns into an absolute monster. But like, I think the other thing though has been like the synergies with like Collector is actually a really strong sub in at a 2-drop spot. Like, he's not going to get explosive like Morbius, but if you're throwing in like the Helicarrier, which when it's discarded gives you 3 cards, if you're throwing in Swarm, like all of a sudden, like if you've got Swarm and the Helicarrier in there, the Collector on one turn jumps up 5 points. And if you're doubling that, like I've had Collector get pretty gnarly. So I think he's breathing life into some cards that I think are, it's been really interesting to see some of the synergies there. And as a 5 cost, 8 power, he's a bit of a monster on the board. Like, that's a significant amount of threat in a lane. Plus in
Yeah.
what he does. Now, the fact of the matter is he is very utilitarian, or very like one sort of one track card. He only really
Right.
does this one thing.
Yeah.
But I think, like I said, it's the obvious synergies that are kind of fun to watch pop off. But really, I think the deck that I've had the most fun watching, and sort of like even losing to, and I hate losing to it, but it's actually the most fun, is like the first time I saw the Invisible Girl, and then turn 5 Modok, and then
Hmm.
and you're hiding all this stuff behind Invisible Girl, and then Hela, and it's like all of a sudden you
Yeah.
watch like Infinite,
Just everything come
like
back.
everything comes back, and it's like, dude, you're just
Yep.
seeing ridiculous power totals on the board. And so
Yeah.
he's been really fun. I think the real challenge is going to be going forward. Um, he needs to become a bit less of a one trick pony. Like, I'd like to see some
Hmm.
more support cards come out that take advantage of his ability, frankly. So
Yeah. So I guess, because I'm curious, how in what ways could they support him better kind of going forward? What are some ideas you might have for that?
well, we've got Stature coming out, right? Stature,
Yeah.
she's going to be a five cost, 7 power. And if your opponent
Hmm.
discards a card, she becomes a 1 cost. Yeah, and that's
Hmm.
at any point in time if they discard. So like she's going to have some, actually, in decks, like you throw Moon Knight and that in there, like you've pretty much
Yeah.
got a guaranteed 1 drop, a 1 drop at 7 power.
Hmm.
So you're I'm sort of interested to see what she does. I don't have any great answers. I mean, like, he's obviously
Yeah.
like, you pair him with Swarm, like a Wong Swarm kind of combo. You've got a
Yeah.
ridiculous amount of 0/3s. So there's like, you could do some, and maybe like you throw Valkyrie in there, and then you do a Cerebro 3 deck.
Yeah. Oh.
And
Okay.
you're paying like, it's, I mean, you've got to get a little goofy in some of that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
so he could work in something like that. I don't, it's one of those things where, like I said, like, because the obvious synergies, like I said, are sort of that Invisible Girl, Modok Hela deck is sort of, that's
Yeah.
it's an absolute monster, but that gets shut down like really quick. Like, I'm gonna sort of like play my, like, I'll sort of out myself a little bit. I try to be like kind of decent when I play people, and somebody threw down Invisible Girl, and I watched them pop something on turn 5, and
Hmm.
well, nothing happened, and I was holding an Enchantress, and I was just like, turn 5, I just dropped her in there, and I watched like his hand just burn, and it was an
Just yeah.
immediate leave. Like, he was just like, I'm out.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so
I've done that before with Arrow, and just watch Modok destroy their entire deck, and it's like, oh, whoops.
yeah, and so no, I just, like I said, like, the right now, outside of things like that and the Morbius plays, he doesn't
Hmm.
have like a ton of synergy. So I just like to maybe see cards
Yeah.
that like get bonuses if you've discarded
Hmm.
something. Um, you know,
Yeah.
obviously he's going to work nice, like fairly decently with Wolverine. Um,
I was about to bring up Wolverine. Yeah, if he discards him, Wolverine comes out as a 4 power, and it's like, okay, well, there's an extra 4 on the board.
He's good for powering up stuff like, I mean, Apocalypse. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I think
Hmm.
he's going to have a role in discard decks, period. But,
Yeah.
and like I said, I think his power, at first, I was kind of like of the mindset that I think his power, he was a little too strong, like 5/8.
Hmm.
But because, like I said, you're only really seeing him played in like 1 or 2 pretty specific applications effectively.
Hmm.
I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, I think 5/8's actually pretty good for him. Um,
Yeah.
so
That's what I was thinking earlier today. As I was just like setting up these combos and playing with Modok and trying to get all these synergies to work. I was like, man, this takes a lot of setup. You got
mhm.
to play Morbius on turn 2, and then I would typically do Calling Wing on turn 3 to get either Wolverine or Swarm to proc their abilities.
Mhm.
And then on turn 4, I drop Dracula, and then by then I'm ready to play Modok, and I'm like, man, there's not a whole lot of power on the board at the moment. So I'm kind of appreciative that he's an 8 power, because I can finally kind of use that to catch up a little bit with my opponent, and then
But something
just kind of go crazy with Morbius.
The problem is that if they nuke Morbius, so if they Enchantress Morbius,
Yep.
your big power play kind of goes away.
Yeah.
So you have that, like you're relying on, and again, I think Collector sort of slots in there, especially if you're playing things like if you're playing Apocalypse and if you're playing Swarm, he can get pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
But it's and I think that's the problem, is that really for him to really be explosive. And the other thing is, like, it's like you're saying, there's not a ton of power on that board. You probably don't have initiative. And if they drop Cosmo in your spot, like on that turn, like just kills your play. Like, so.
But you'd be surprised. You don't really see, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Cosmos getting played on turn 5. Usually they'll play them on like, on turn 3 or turn 4. And then it's like, well, you kind of wasted that lane, and I was already going for this lane over here anyway. So party time.
Yeah.
Cowabunga it is.
Yeah. I mean, I've like, and I'm just gonna like, but yeah, I haven't seen a ton of Cosmo period lately. Which I'm okay with.
I haven't either,
because most of the time he pops up in the most annoying possible spot. But But yeah,
I will say I've run into him a few times today because people were playing destroyer decks, and I'm like, man, I haven't seen this in a long time. So that's kind of cool to see. But so I think part of the problem too is we've come off the last 2 seasons where we've gotten Silver Surfer, which was an insane card. That thing, you could get to infinite with that. I never did because I suck at the game, but you had that. Then you had Zabu, which was originally making all 4 cost cards down to 2 cost cards. And it was just mayhem all over the place. And you go into Modok and it's like, this is cool, but it's not as awesome as those last 2 cards. So I think I think Modok is a good card, but this kind of goes into kind of, would we snap or pass on the card? There's going to be a lot of people that probably still don't have the season pass. And really by the time this episode releases to public feeds, we have 1 week left in the season. I wouldn't recommend spending the $10 to get the season pass on the last week. I did that when I first got the game in October. Don't recommend it, because then you basically waste $10 unless you're going to play an insane amount that entire week. But he's going to get put in the game, as all the season pass cards do. Is this one that you think people should snap or pass on?
I'm kind of like, I think at this point in time, pass on him. Just wait, like, unless you absolutely have to have him, right? But like early on, and I think he's a worthwhile card. Like, I've sort of been like in my head keeping like a tiered list of different cards, and he's definitely like either like weak A, strong B tier. He's got good presence on the board. He's got some nice synergies with, you can pull off some like pretty gnarly plays with, him in a discard deck. I'd probably put him in like a B tier, actually, because like I said, he is sort of a one-trick pony. He is strong and he's got good presence, but it's like he's really only super effective and explosive in the discard meta, and specifically with Morbius.
That's kind of my same thoughts too. Mine thing is, like, if you were, let's say you're playing and you didn't get the season pass, and that's fine. You want to strictly be a free to play player. And then when you eventually get enough tokens, a year from now to maybe afford him, well, he'd probably drop down to tier 3 by then. But I think what I like most about Modok is he provides a more controlled experience for playing discard. Before, when you played it, you had, your Lady Sif, which you can still play, Swordmaster, Gambit, which is like, I couldn't care less for Gambit. I think he's one of the worst cards in the game, which is my little hot spicy take. But you just had all these cards that were so randomized that you could try to get it controlled with Colin Wing, Lady Sif, and use those. But I just feel like he provides a more controlled experience playing discard, that I actually prefer that over what discard used to be. But at the same time, I don't know that he's necessarily a necessity for discard, because discard before that, really once you get enough of the cards for discard, the discard meta or just a discard deck with the right cards is insane. Like if you have Calling Wing paired with a Swarm, great. If you have Lady Sif paired with Apocalypse, awesome. If you throw Infinite in there and then Ghost Rider as well, let's say you do Lady Sif takes out Ghost Rider, play Ghost Rider. Sorry, you do Lady Sif, takes out Infinite, then you do Ghost Rider on the next turn to pull them back in. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty awesome with the right cards. Yeah. But I think Modok as just a component of the discard deck, I don't know that he's one that you necessarily need to rush out and get or, spend the tokens on. I think there's better things out there. But again, if you really love discard, or if you really love Modok, then obviously you want to put him in there.
Like I said, I think if you introduce some cards that have more like passive effects, like, and again, I don't know, I don't have anything in mind, but like something that gets something that gets like a +2 buff if you've discarded anything, or, things like that. Maybe more cards that come like dig themselves out of the graveyard, whatever. That kind of stuff. It's like, but for right now, he's got a fairly limited suite of like interactions. Now they're good. They're very strong interactions, but it is kind of like, it's a bit of a one trick pony with him. Yeah. So,
yeah. So there you go. Snappers. I think would we say, so we're definitively saying pass on Modok for now, at least until he probably gets a little more support.
Early on in the season, I would have said pick it but
because he was everywhere. I mean,
like at this point in time, unless you absolutely have to have him, just, it's like you said, it's almost a waste of your money. Really.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. So we'll wait and see what the next season's card is. But speaking of cards, some of you, maybe this is your first introduction to Modok and you're like, why is this Funko Pop on a levitating chair blowing things up with this crystal on his head? What is up with that? He's in the Ant-Man movie, but he's kind of stupid there. So what am I missing here? Is Modok actually a cool character? Is he a cool villain? I don't know. This is where we come in. So every month, or at least we're going to try and do every month, we're going to give you a lore card where my buddy Colin is going to come on, record a little bit and talk to you about kind of the origin of Modok and what his powers are and his breakdown and things like that. And so we're going to switch over to that. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll have to click the video link that'll show up at the end of the episode to go watch that, because it'll be a separate upload. If you're listening to podcast feeds, it'll just roll right into it. But this brings episode 3 of the Snapchatter podcast to a close. You can follow us on social media over on Twitter, twitter.com/snapchatterpod. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like the video and hit the subscribe button. Maybe share the video with a fellow Marvel Snap fan, or maybe introduce someone to Marvel Snap. We've gotten a lot of people playing over at TRG. Some new people, the editor for TRG, Skinner, started playing, and he sends me messages periodically saying, I hate you for getting me into this. So I'm like,
Skinner, stop, Skinner, stop.
He's going to be like that dude from, Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the board. And he's going to be like going crazy with all the different decks that he's trying to build. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be awesome. But Nate, man, where can other people find us?
Well,
or I guess find you.
I was going to say, like, they can find me at pretty much everywhere. I'm Nate_McKeever. So yeah, I'm not super duper present, but I try to interact with people, and sometimes I post some interesting things. Sometimes I get a little spicy and I rant and I rave about Iceman and Scorpion. So
it's always a good time. You can find me on pretty much everything, like Twitter, Marvel Snap, as the Theo Logan. If you see a Modok profile pic and one that says tacos after this, you found me. You're playing against me. Please go easy on me. Never mind. Don't go easy on me, because I won't go easy on you. We've talked about it in the Discord, so I'm pretty crazy depending on what deck I'm playing. But yeah. Anyway, y'all, thank you for listening to this episode of. I keep getting our podcast confused. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Snapchatter podcast, a Marvel Snap podcast. Let's roll into the lore card, and we will see you next week.
Peace.